All right, welcome into the Five Guys on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. We got our guy Alex Donno. You can follow him at Alex Donno. Very convenient. Check out the latest episode of Five on the Floor that I did with Sean Rochester about a similar topic that we're going to do here, but we're going to take a little bit of a different perspective on it. Thanks again to our sponsors. As always, Michael Robert and his team in Boca Raton, Water Cleanup of Florida. You can find them at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com, Water Cleanup of Florida. If you've got a leak in your home, in your business, they can take care of it right away. Take care of it before it gets worse. Now, of course, if it does get worse, they can do the damage assessment. They can do the mold remediation. They can do the water mitigation. They can do the dry out. They can do all of that stuff. But reach out to Water Cleanup of Florida. More than 70 five-star reviews on Google, 561-408-7835. That's 561-408-7835. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you got the schmutz, they got the guts. Speaking of guts.
I don't have any guts right now, Ethan.
Short on guts. Somewhat upset guts right now. Heat fans are not happy. We're going to try to put this into some kind of context, and I tried to do this with Sean, and again, this is going to get a lot of eye rolls from people, so I understand that, but I think, again, nuance is required, and then we get to what the real issues are. Donovan Mitchell is re-signing or extending with the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is not a huge surprise, actually. No. 3 years, $150 plus million. All signs have been pointing this way for a while. It seemed a matter of time. The Cavaliers were fairly confident in what the situation was going to play out with Donovan. I know that Heat fans had some hope because of the relationship with Bam, the flirting that has taken place in the past. But honestly, and I'll just say this at the very beginning, I don't think that the chances of this were ever as good as the chances were of Dame Lillard coming to Miami. And unfortunately, as we pivot back a year, that was killed by another GM's unwillingness to work with the Heat. This was killed by the player making a decision. And, those are two things that to a large degree are out of the Heat's hands. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but we can have a discussion about how the Heat got in this place and how they get out of it. That is a reasonable conversation. The frustration from fans is understood. But when I'm literally going on every Heat Instagram post, and it's not the best time to post about a two-way contract for Drew Smith, I can tell you that, but yet the Heat did that. When I'm looking at those Instagram posts, this fan base is furious, at least the diehards. And when I say the diehards, I mean the social media types, the 10%. Then there's sort of the fans who follow the team pretty regularly, Alex, who maybe have season tickets or something like that. I don't know where those fans are right now. I don't know how they're going to feel about a run it back situation. I mean, we interact, again, with the most passionate, the most rabid, and in some ways, in some cases, the most irrational. And so, again, I understand the frustrations, but you can't get a player who isn't available. I'm just going to say that at the start. If he decided to sign the extension, he decided to sign the extension. To this point, I don't have really any information that this was because the Heat were not offering anything. Now, I'll get the post-mortem on this, but again, it wasn't as simple as going and signing Donovan as a free agent or even, saying, here, we're going to give up these players. He's going to come. He ultimately made the decision. He made the decision to stay. And now, Alex, I think we need to talk about, okay, what direction do they go? Because I'm starting to feel a little bit differently now about sort of where the franchise is, because I don't see another player out there that can really change their fortunes for next season.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts on this Donovan Mitchell thing happening today. First of all, I guess I can thank you for softening the blow for me a little bit, because I can recall a quick conversation that we had on this channel going back a few weeks where you had said, hey, it's not really trending in the direction where, you thought at that point he'd probably end up re-signing or signing the extension with Cleveland, which he ultimately did. So you softened the blow for me on that. It doesn't make seeing that headline, doesn't make it hurt a whole lot less, Ethan, when, whatever it was about 3 hours ago today when we saw, it's being reported, it's official, whatever it is, that Spida is staying in Cleveland. It was still a blow to my guts, right? It was still a gut check for me as a Miami Heat fan. I guess I'm thankful, even though this situation resolved in a negative way from a Heat perspective. I'm glad that it was resolved relatively quickly, that it happened on July 2nd, and it didn't, drag on for however long the Dame Lillard saga drug on for. At least we can mentally move on from this one quickly.
Although I would have taken the downloads from the 58 podcast I was going to do. I will say that. It ended a little soon for me for that.
So that's on the other hand. And then I also think that what happened last summer with Dame, which, probably wasn't the Heat's fault given those circumstances last year. This one doesn't really seem like it's the Heat's fault that Mitchell decided he wants to stay in Cleveland. But I think that what happened last year with Dame, what's happening now with Mitchell, that makes it even harder for Heat fans, because now multiple summers in a row, you just start to get this feeling that the Heat franchise, whether it's a fair or unfair perception, people start to get this feeling that this franchise has become too complacent, too reliant on Jimmy, too reliant on Tyler Hero, who I'm sure we're going to talk about on this episode, because he seems to be maybe lashing out on social media a little bit. I mean, I wasn't even sure if you could still see likes to what people, I thought they got rid of that, but apparently you can still see what people like on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it now. So yeah, you seem the Heat perception is so reliant on running it back and depending on the same players who haven't gotten us over the hump the last couple of years, when the fan base just wants Riley and company to do something big, and that big move isn't happening.
Well, you use the word something, and I think, again, that's the word that we need to talk about, because it does feel like Heat fans just want something. Yeah. And I get that, but it can't be the wrong something. And that's kind of where I'm at, and that's why I'm thinking a little bit about their build, and where this goes, and really what stage of a build we're in, and maybe this is actually the second part. This is the start of a different build. Something would have been, say, trading for Bradley Beal last year and taking on $57 million without the ability to trade him. Would that have been a smart something? No. Did Heat fans, for the majority of them, want it because they were frustrated about the Dame situation? Yes. And so that's why, again, I say let's take a step back and look at how they got here and where they are. The landscape of the NBA has changed. Pat acknowledged that. He's aware of it. He acknowledged it 2 or 3 years ago. You don't wait for free agency anymore. Cap space is meaningless. And then the second apron situation came in, and they don't want to be above the second apron. And we'll say this over and over and over. They are right about that. That's not a question of spending money. It's a question of not having any flexibility going forward. Now, do I blame them for some things? Yes. Why are they in this situation where they never seem to have enough assets?
Exactly. That's what I want to know.
Okay.
Because the last couple of years, it never seems like they have enough assets to make the deals we want them to make.
Right. And then, the Knicks have $3 million first-round picks basically to trade for a third 3-and-D wing, right? Like, you already got Josh Hart, and you've got Anunoby, and you're going to pay them. And now we're going to pay another guy from Villanova in Bridges. And I don't know how it's going to work out for the Knicks, but I do know that the single most important commodity in the modern NBA is the 3-and-D player at a high level. And they have 3 of them. And the Heat's best player is a 3-and-D player. Well, not a 3-and-D player, but I'm sorry, he's a wing that the 3-and-D players are going to guard. And so that's not ideal. The discussion that needs to be had is, again, how they got here, okay, and how they don't end up here again. They have had to, in the past, and we're going to do this on 5 on the Floor, but I'm going to credit Miami Heat beat because they already did it, and I think they did a good job of it, Brian Goins in particular. That they have had to attach picks to get off of mistakes. And that is problematic, okay? And you're going to pay for that at some point. And they've even had to attach picks just to get deals done. I'll go back to this one. The Jimmy Butler deal, 2019, right? Absolutely the right deal to make, okay?
Yeah.
They had tried to get him from Minnesota the previous year. It fell apart mostly because the Wolves wanted Bam, Tibbs at the time. The Heat weren't going to do that. Pat hung up. Okay. Next year, they pivot. They get him from Philadelphia. They think they have him in a multi-team deal where Dallas is involved. There's some kind of weird mix-up with Dallas about whether it was Dragic. You would have been trading Dragic, by the way. Dragic or Olynyk or what it was. And to save that deal, they had to give up a first-round pick, I believe, to the Clippers. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while now. Maybe it's Portland. Instead of taking Harkless at that time, they ended up having to give up a first-round pick. Okay. Now, again, these things accumulate, second round picks, first round picks, when you're having to trade players to get off of bad money. Then there you get into the contracts. Okay. But Tyler Johnson's a good example. They decided to match that. That was actually the Harrisons who decided to match that. That wasn't really Pat's idea. And people are talking about Mickey being cheap. In that case, they made a mistake matching the deal with Tyler Johnson. They made a mistake in 17, giving those contracts to James Johnson and to Dion Waiters, right? And then they had to get off of those deals. They did by packaging Justice Winslow. They ended up getting Iguodala, Solomon Hill, and Crowder. Two of those players were instrumental in them getting to the finals. What I'm saying is that they've had to make these moves to get off of mistakes. And then we can say, okay, was the Duncan Robinson contract a mistake? I don't think it is now. It didn't look like it last season. But again, they made a decision. I think if Duncan's healthy, he's worth $18 million. But okay, it didn't work out for about a year and a half. They did not make the mistake with Strus, which would have been an overpay. All right. With Gabe, they offered him something, but not that much. We saw the year that Gabe had. They're going to let Caleb go. So it seems like at least they've made the decision, and we'll see what happens with Highsmith. But they've made the decision, okay, once we develop these guys, we're not going to overpay them. We can go find others. I think that's the right decision. But they weren't making that decision for a little while. And that depleted some of their assets, okay? And additionally now, they've given a lot of money to Tyler Hero, all right, which was market value at the time, all right? When you look at what other guys, RJ Barrett, others in his class were getting, Alex, it was market value at the time. But it hasn't worked out. Not because Tyler's a bad player, not because Tyler hasn't improved. He has improved, okay? But he hasn't been available enough, and it's a bad fit. Okay. And so now it's like, and then the Rozier trade, which again, I can't criticize them for that because I called for it. Okay. I liked the trade. So far, it hasn't worked out because the guy wasn't available at the end of the season. And additionally, he and Hero are not going to be a good fit. I'm standing on that. So what I'm saying is, okay, that they have put themselves somewhat in this position. They have paid Jimmy a significant amount of money. They have paid Bam, extended him twice now, right? They're now standing on business when it comes to Jimmy. They decided they weren't going to give him the extension right now. We're not going to pay that kind of money going forward. We're not going to hamstring ourselves. And so Jimmy has kind of done and I said this would happen. I was saying this consistently after Riley's press conference, that Jimmy was then going to take I'm breaking up with you, you're not breaking up with me position. And so now you've got this question with Jimmy. But if you're going to transition to not making mistakes with money, with flexibility, with all that, there's going to be some pain in that. And I think we're in the pain part. And I'll go to this with you, Alex, and then we'll go to the break. I mean, do you now make a move for a very expensive player who doesn't necessarily put you in the top 3 or 4 of the East? Because that's the conversation now that Heat fans are having, because they just want somebody. And to me, it feels like the Bradley Beal thing all over again. Zach LaVine, even Trae Young. Like, is that something that you would do?
Oh, I mean, it would be at this point, people want to try something different. And, Trae Young is obviously a guy that we've watched for many years, scoring a lot, grabbing a lot of headlines, getting on a lot of highlight reels. But how much better would somebody like that make your team, depending on what you have to give up to get him?
I mean, it seems like his market is not great. They traded DeJounte Murray first because they could get more. Yeah. And they didn't even get that much for DeJounte. I mean, if you compare, DeJounte, when he's at a high level, is every bit as good as Mikal Bridges. They didn't get, Mikal Bridges' value for DeJounte. I mean, DeJounte to me is, he's below all-star, but he's not that far below. And Mikal is kind of a borderline all-star. And as far as Trae goes, again, would he make you better offensively? No question. Okay. I mean, you're talking about range out to 30 feet. He's a very underrated passer. He's a disaster on defense, and he's tiny. So you're talking about, yes, this is what you're paying Bam for. I mean, Raziel the Great comes in. He can't defend. He's basically a mini hero. I mean, look, he's better than Tyler, but again, how much better does he make you? Yes, he would get Bam the ball more often. Okay, Bam would get some more dunks. I don't know. Then you're pivoting with Trae and Bam after Jimmy leaves, if that's the case. And the other one, LaVine, bad knees. Okay, he came in the league as an athlete. He became more of a three-point shooter. Bad knees, doesn't seem to be about winning. Has never been the defender that his athleticism should suggest. And the Bulls can't get anything for him. Now, I'll throw this at you, and then we will break. If the Bulls somehow came to you and said, "Here's a first-round pick. You can replenish your asset pool. Take LaVine off our hands." You do it.
I would do that. So you're getting a play. You can argue about how much he would help, but you're getting a player who could help, and you're replenishing your draft pool that always seems to be unplenished, if that's even a word. I'd be interested in that, Ethan.
They got better when he got hurt. I mean, I'm just saying they got better when he got hurt. And I like LaVine. I liked him as a rookie. I thought he was going to be a better player than Wiggins, actually, even though Wiggins got all the hype on that team.
Yeah.
But I just don't know. I mean, they got better when he got hurt. And people say, well, okay, you put him in this system defensively. He still has some athleticism. You'll protect him with Bam. I'll say this. I mean, I'm looking at the current roster, and internal development or not, they're going to have a hard time selling me that this roster is better than last year's. Last year, I bought it, okay, that it was better than the year before.
Yeah, we bought it because it was coming off of finals, and you could sell what they had last year.
And Tyler was coming back off of injury. They made it to the finals without him. They drafted Jaquez. Again, I didn't expect much from Jovic last year. He actually exceeded my expectations and exceeded theirs. But with some of the things that they did, Josh forgave. I bought some of it. And Kevin Love being there for a full season, you're going to have a hard time selling me this time. Their point of attack defense is going to be an absolute effing disaster. Anyway, speaking of not a disaster, get some Panthers jerseys.
Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a great new sponsor that fits with us perfectly. It's called jerseys305.com. That's jerseys305.com. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and the other local teams. Their mission was born from a passion for wearing jerseys of the old styles and the past players. Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. And Jerseys 305 was created by the fans, for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they're probably listening to this episode right now. So check them out, Jerseys 305, their partnership with 5 Reasons Sports, celebrating with a 10% discount on the next purchase using the code 5 at checkout. Unlock your exclusive savings on the entire vintage collection.
Let's talk about the roster as it is, while saying, okay, that this may not be it. Again, they're working on things. I know people don't like me to say that. But then, there were the dual tweets from Anthony and Ira. Whenever you get the dual tweets, you know what I'm saying. They came out basically saying that they had so many players guaranteed spots, and they were considering, and if they add Orlando Robinson as a guarantee, we know what that how fans take that. I understand why they take it that way when you get the dual tweets. Sometimes it's the trio of tweets from the beat guys. I tend to be the cleanup guy afterwards, after all these tweets come out. So, look, there may be nothing else, but there may be something else. If there is nothing else, okay, this is where we're at, all right? They're going to lose Caleb.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have Haywood at about 40% to return. I know he promised.
Oh.
Yeah, I know he promised my daughter at Heat Camp that he would return. And I want her to be a newsbreaker, but I'm just saying that his market is pretty robust from what I hear, and their vehicles to retain him, as we went through on the podcast, are not great. And so we'll see. They've re-signed Kevin Love. I like it for a lot of different reasons, but I mean, impact on the basketball court, we have to moderate at this point of his career. He'll be more effective than Haslam was, or play more than Haslam did in the last 2 years of his career, but he's just basically assuming the Haslam role, and I expect to see maybe Kevin in the organization. It was a good move, okay, for a lot of reasons. Mentorship, leadership, and I thought he played well last season. He plays well with Jimmy in particular. But again,
yeah.
The DeLon Wright things. The DeLon Wright thing surprises me. I really thought they would try to retain him at the minimum. I'm trying to figure out what went on there, because he went to Milwaukee, and again, they don't have any point of attack defenders. If Haywood leaves along with Caleb, I mean, you're counting on Josh. Josh didn't defend very well for the first 2 months of last season. He found his role offensively a little bit. They're really short. Now, I do think a DSJ, Dennis Smith Jr., who keeps liking Brady's posts, saying that he should be coming to Miami. I know that he wanted to come to Miami last year. If Dame had come, he got tired of waiting. I think he could replace what DeLon gave you. But again, rotationally, I mean, they're thin. I don't even know, like, in the backcourt, are you starting Rozier and Hero at this moment? Can Duncan walk? Can Rozier turn his neck around? Like, we haven't got reports on any of that I can trust at this point. And the other guy is Tyler, who, like you said, is liking posts, basically calling this a toxic fan base, which it is. Like that's your backcourt. You got one guy who apparently hurt his neck in bed. Another guy who is a shooter with a back problem, and a two guard who at this point, the entire fan base is all over. And then in the front court, you don't have Caleb. You may not have Haywood. I like the Ware edition. I like the pick. I like the second round pick. Looks interesting to me. Kashad Johnson looks interesting to me. But you are definitely talking about running it back. Then, like, I can't spin that. That's and how much improvement are you getting from Jovic and Jaquez to make up for the rest of it? Because that is what they're going to lean into. Yeah. But now they also have their number one guy, who I think is going to play hard and a lot for them this year because he needs a contract at the end of the season. But you never know how this could go. This is, again, I think it's going to go a certain way. I've said that. I've been right so far, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be right once the season starts. And what if Jimmy goes in the tank?
I'll tell you the big things, and you touched on it at the end there, because I'm trying to think of reasons to get excited for this season coming up. Now, at least I can be excited for hockey, right? They just had the parade. I could see how the Panthers defend that championship, and I'm a Heat lifer, so I'm going to be there, no thick or thin. I will be there for the Miami Heat. But when you talk about Jovic and Jaquez, it's like this is going to be one of those years, and we haven't had. Hope they prove me wrong. We haven't had too many of these years as Miami Heat fans, but every now and then it's like, well, I'm watching for the younger guys. I'm watching for the development. I don't have high expectations because this, I know the last couple of years they were in the play-in. They didn't look like play-in teams on paper the last couple of years. This year they look like a play-in team going into it. So that's kind of where my expectation is. But I want to see what Jaquez and Jovic mainly can do. And obviously I'm curious to see if Jimmy plays more than 60, if he plays enough games to be eligible for postseason awards this year, if he plays 65 plus in the regular season, I'm interested to see that. But this running it back thing, which is basically what it is, minus a couple of important from last year, it's troubling. And I know you could talk about toxic fan bases, and maybe there's somebody mentioned there's kind of a Heat Twitter civil war right now. You can understand why. I mean, this organization has set such a high bar. And, if you zoom out over the last 20 years, even longer than that, if you go back to the acquisition of Zoe, like they've made so many big seismic moves over the past 2-3 decades that you kind of expect something like that, especially coming off a disappointing season and postseason. And we're probably not going to get that. You talk about those dueling tweets, which I think hints at something that they're probably not doing anything. It's troubling. Like, as a Heat fan, it really is troubling thinking, I don't know if essentially the same roster can really do better than what they did last year. And that's what we're in store for this year.
Well, look, the Panthers lost some depth pieces yesterday, right? And some Panther fans are upset. So I say welcome to the club. The Panthers are officially now a major team in South Florida because people are complaining about transactions. But again, they're keeping their top 6 and their top goaltender. And they're still going to be favorites to get back to the finals. The Heat are not in that position right now. Now, the thing I keep coming back to is if Pat Riley doesn't think he can get one of these guys, why is he still running the show? And I don't say that to mean I'm pushing Pat out, but like Pat is late in his life. He could go do other things. He must believe that one of these things is going to break at some point because having a sort of middle of the pack play-in team now, which essentially, again, I know they made it to the finals 2 years ago, so we can couch that either direction, glass half full, glass half empty. But to essentially have a team that coming into this season, okay, unless Jaquez and Jovic, and I've been in favor of keeping Jovic, okay, I have, all right, I've said that consistently. Yeah. All right, but like unless they make major strides this season, the Heat are not better than Boston. They're not better than Philly. They're not better than New York. They're likely not better than Cleveland. They're likely not better than Orlando. They're likely not better than Indiana. I just got to 6. Okay? I just got to 6. Now, other teams, there's still garbage in the Eastern Conference. Okay? I don't think Toronto's going to be very good still. I don't think Detroit's going to be very good still. I don't think Charlotte's going to be very good still. I know Washington's not going to be very good still. Okay? The Nets are going to be horrific. Okay? So essentially what you're saying is like you have a cushion under you, right? There's a floor because there's 5 or 6 teams that are just going to suck. All right?
Yeah.
So what are you again? You're 39 to 44 wins, 38 to 44 wins, depending on Jimmy's availability and attitude. I mean, that's the worst place to be in the NBA. It's the worst place to be. Now, they will argue, okay, I'm going to give their argument before they give it. They will argue that they have really talented young players now, that their ceilings of their young players are higher than like, the guys they've developed, like the Struces and the Vincents and the Magruders and all those guys. That you've got young guys with like Jaquez and Jovic and now Ware and others, and these are higher upside young players, and that we should look forward to that. And they will lean into that. But it's hard to lean into that when you got Jimmy Butler still sitting there. And that is kind of why I sort of think, and I'll end it here, Alex, I sort of think we're at this stage where I don't think Jimmy's traded now, but January, February, I don't know. I mean, let's see where he's at this point, but I think you have to be looking at maybe a pivot. Bam is not a number 1. He's a number 2, but I think you're looking for a pivot at that point and saying, okay, with Bam, Jovic, Jaquez, Ware, and then the assets we get for Jimmy, then here's a reboot, okay? And we're going to try to accumulate as many picks. I still think Jimmy, provided, again, he's reasonably healthy, will have value at the deadline because of what he's done in the past in the playoffs, and that there can be teams that will talk themselves into it, and that he will actually be fairly coveted at that stage. So I don't expect to trade now, but I would watch Houston. I would watch that. There are other teams out there that I think you can look at with him, and I it's going to be hard to argue against it if this team is middling around 500. That's where I see it. So again, things could change in the next 24 hours. This organization has pulled shit out of their bleeps before. Okay, they have. So I never count it out, but I'm not blaming them for the Mitchell thing, just like I didn't blame them for the Lillard thing. But I understand Heat fans' frustration that it just kind of feels like they're at the poker table and they have no chips.
Yep.
And that's been the case.
Analogy.
They just have no chips. Like it's late in the night and they can't. There's really nothing that they can do at this point. Okay, and I'm going to get this from Leonard because this is kind of funny because I'm described as the water carrier. So you put this one up from Leonard Vance. Here we go. You ready? This is where Heat fans are right now. And Leonard, we appreciate you following. So I'm not mocking you. I'm just saying it's just kind of funny because 99% of my responses and my tweets are that I'm basically doing the work of the front office. If they are healthy, they will be better. Ethan, want to go cover some other team? Ethan has to be the most negative person I ever heard. You ain't been on Twitter. You ain't been on Twitter lately. All right, we appreciate it. Thanks for following. More episodes coming up. Follow the YouTube channel. I'm just going to try to present both sides. That's what I try to do. And then I'll tell you what I think after that. And I don't count these guys out. Okay. Pat, Eric, Andy, Mickey, they're smart people. Okay. And they've done a lot of good down here, and they found a lot of really good players that other people haven't found. I think the draft pick's going to be really good. But I got to call it like I see it. Like they seem to be operating in a different space. It's not because they won't spend. It's because they are limited in terms of what they can offer. And these, again, sometimes they're right not to offer it, even what they do have, like Bradley Beal last year. But I understand. I'm just saying I understand Heat fans' frustrations with coming back with virtually the same group. All right. And Kmart says it best. It's only been 3 days. Let's see what else happens. Exactly. Follow us for all of it. We appreciate it. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
And check out Playback. Download the Playback app. We'll be on there. Eternal and everybody will be spilling news before I tell him he's allowed to. Have a good one, everybody.